Good afternoon again, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of shoulders and how we keep them healthy. We talked about in part 1 the importance of being able to control the position of that scapula and how difficult a lot of people find being able to position that scapula in a good position for either rowing or pushing movements. We know there's a difficulty, we know people have problems with that, but what do we do about it? There's a couple of different things that we have to look for when we're looking to actually get good movement out of the shoulder, get good stability out of the shoulder, and good positioning. Probably the first thing we can start with is improper cues. One of the things we hear a lot with instructors or people in the fitness industry is the cue to pull the shoulder down and back. And if you can see, I guess you can't see, if you can see in the bottom part of my shoulder blade, if I cue, as most people do, down and back, I get a real pinching in that shoulder blade. It's actually what we call scapular winging. So it's actually not a very good position. It's very much like trying to stabilize my pelvis by jamming it up the back. I can't move my pelvis anymore, but it's not stable in the middle of the muscle tissue. It's just being banged up against its own skeletal self. So the same sort of thing when people say to drop the shoulders. This is what we call depression, and then retraction. If I do that too much, you can clearly see that's not very good posture. So that's not where I'm going to want to work from. What I want to do is I want to have slight depression of that shoulder. So I want that shoulder blade pulling down, and I want actually upward rotation. So what I actually want is that shoulder blade driving forward and through. So instead of having an angle this way against the shoulder, I want the distal and bottom part of that shoulder blade actually posteriorly tilting, just like the hips would do, and push against my thorax. So one of my trainers came up with a good cue, Gaynor, thank you very much, to actually imagine that you're pushing the shoulder blade forward through to your chest. So if you imagine in this position, I'm not wanting to jam that shoulder down and back, but I'm slight depression and then I'm pushing that shoulder blade forward. So it's actually going from an angle like this, flat up against my rib cage. So there's a few different exercises we can do to actually encourage that movement. One's going to be with the row. We see, again, an incorrect position is if I'm trying to jam that shoulder all the way back. So what we call again is depression and retraction, and then try and move from there. It's actually not a very stable position. So what I want to be able to do, again, is get that rotation. So I'm getting slight depression of the shoulder blade. I drive that shoulder forward, and then I can move from there, and it's a nice stable position, and I'm not moving that shoulder in and out of position. Perhaps an easier way to demonstrate that is lying on the floor or on a bench. And I can actually practice that pulling forward and through in that stable position. So as I'm pushing forward and through, I'm actually protracting that scapula, lengthening through the spine, and actually dropping my shoulders in position. So you can see that rotation that's actually happening there. It's not jamming, but slight depression, and I push that shoulder blade forward and through, and that will hold that position. And this can be quite a good test to see if that shoulder's finding position. Imagine I'm pulling myself forward without actually pulling myself forward. That gives me a good drawing or posterior tilt of that scapula. One of the things I have to be a bit cautious of is putting the cart before the horse. If we find clients have a poor connection with their lumbar spine, so they're dropped through their lumbar spine, you'll often see that created in this poor posture here. I can try and correct at the top, but if I don't correct through the bottom, I'm going to find that very hard to achieve. Oftentimes when we find people are in a poor shoulder position, what we call a kyphotic position, just by lengthening through the tissue in the back, being able to create an upward position in that lumbar spine, we can actually recorrect that thoracic position. So again, from here, I got that tailbone tucked under, it's holding in position, and I try and correct from the top, and I can find that very uncomfortable. Instead, I correct with the tissue through the bottom, so I get that lumbar in a correct position without doing anything through the top. You can see that just by correcting that lumbar position, I'm going to correct the position of the shoulders. So make sure we're working with the correct thoracic position to start with, and And then by looking to learn how to posteriorly tilt that shoulder blade back against that thoracic cage, not to jam back and down too hard, we'll probably find we're able to hold that shoulder in a better position for both pushing movements and pulling movements. Hope this helped.